Okay, welcome. I want to thoroughly begin by saying how excited I am to begin this training. We are starting intervention. We are going to learn how to swim and just submerge ourselves in intervention because it is so important. I created this training to be quick and easy. I'm going to talk you through it. I'm going to walk you through it, but there's guides and notes so you can spend time learning on your own and really getting this, because I don't want this to feel forced. I don't want this to feel like something that was rushed either, but I know how important your time is. So let's get right into it. This is lesson 1. We're dipping our toes into intervention. We are just getting started. This lesson will hopefully just, dip your toes into it. We're just going to feel the water. So for today's lesson, we're going to go over the why intervention is important, the definition of intervention that we will be using, and the definition of teacher-created or teacher-centered intervention. Okay? Intervention importance. This quote or this picture means so much to me because I think it is a great representation of today's education system. I don't know. I mean, there's 20,100 programs out there about what's best for education, and none of them are perfected. What are we supposed to do? Just keep swimming in circles? We're not going in a direction that matters. Teaching is hard. We all know how hard it can be, and every day new challenges arise. With these new challenges comes 1,000 new teaching models. Like I just said, methods, techniques, and strategies. But what if we put our effort into a method that's been researched and tested and we know makes a difference? I think good things could come. Intervention strategies have been around since the better half of the 2000s, and research studies have proven the effectiveness of them. We know when intervention is used properly that it drastically increases student achievement and helps teachers feel more accomplished at the end of the day. I don't know about you, but I've taught, and it's exhausting. There are days when I walk away and I go, we did nothing. Yeah, intervention, it changes that, and I've seen it firsthand. The problem arises, though, when we look at how little training educators today have received on intervention. When the idea of RTI and other intervention strategies came out years ago, only special education teachers were trained because it was right before inclusion or right on the cusp of inclusion when it was becoming this huge thing and teachers didn't know how to deal with it and specialists didn't know how to deal with it, and it was a huge shift in our education world. So intervention came out and they were like, we can do this, teachers can do this. So they trained special education teachers who were then supposed to train the classroom teachers. And some of them did, but some of them didn't. And then it just stopped. Special education teachers didn't receive any more training, and you were left. You were left behind as a classroom educator. Since then, though, RTI, or response to intervention, or any form of intervention you hear today, has morphed and grown. As the course continues, we will learn that intervention can be used in all academic areas and for behavior. I know that every single one of you that tunes into this training has that one little friend, and we love them. We do. We think they're a hoot and a holler 9 times out of 10, but they are bent, so stuck on making sure that nothing goes the way we had planned it, and it goes down to their behavior. We also have that one friend who we might not like so much, who does the exact same thing, but with more attitude. And what are we going to do? Nothing seems to work for our friend. This is where intervention will come into play, because it does wonderful things for academics and behaviors. As it morphed, teachers were just expected to know how to use it, and special education teachers stopped receiving the official training. So nobody knows how to use it right, but it's still the foundation of inclusion. Interesting. I don't think those pieces fit together. I don't think those puzzle pieces fit together, to be more exact. Hopefully by the end of this lesson, my goal is that you understand the importance, you understand why this training is so badly needed. And you'll understand what intervention is, what teacher-centered intervention or response to intervention tier 2, what it actually is. Okay, so here's where we dive into it. It's important because we had COVID. And COVID shut down the world, including education. The educational system, I will say, was one of the few that tried to keep going. We did things online. We gave teachers Google Classrooms. We gave teachers Zoom meetings. We gave teachers all the online tools you can imagine. But there's a reason not every child is homeschooled. There's a reason not every child is taught through technology. It doesn't work for all of our students. Educators did amazing across the board. I mean, we had teachers pulling out stops and programs and activities like they had Mary Poppins bags sitting in their house. We had amazing educators do amazing things. At the end of the day, though, there were still tiny humans that they were responsible for that did not get the lesson. Now, I'm not saying that if they had done the exact same thing in person, you would have had Johnny and Susie and Billy all get the lesson. The difference is that different children didn't get different things. We're seeing these achievement gaps in the difference between Susie, whose mom sat behind her and made sure she was at lesson every day, to Johnny, whose mom got behind him once or twice a week and she was on the phone. Johnny didn't learn probably, I would say, 75% of those lessons. And Susie mastered 75% of them. And the problem is it isn't just Johnny that had this experience. It's Johnny and Billy and Sam and Jane. And the list goes on and on and on. We had more students miss more lessons due to COVID than we have had in a decade plus. Those achievement gaps are drastic and huge and terrifying. And I say that as an educator. Intervention works in a way that closes achievement gaps. I'm not saying we're going to close them completely, but we will shrink them. And if you use it, and the teacher that this student gets next year, and the teacher after them, we have a better chance at closing those achievement gaps using intervention than we do any other program that's out there right now. Intervention is also more than just assisting our lower achieving students. Okay, so I just read off the slide, and I hate when I do that, but that's a sentence you need to hear. Listen carefully. Intervention is more than just assisting lower achieving students. Intervention allows you to reach your higher achieving students and your on grade level students. Now, I say this very hesitantly because I do not want you to start thinking of intervention as below grade level, at grade level, and above grade level. And we'll talk about this more later. But I do want you to know that it works for all of those groups of students. Intervention is about giving the time to every single student in your classroom. Every single student. Sometimes our higher achieving students get left behind. And we don't think it's getting left behind because they're still on grade level. They're actually above grade level. They're doing great. But little David that you left sitting because he was easy, because he knew it, I didn't have to worry about him. He gets left behind. He's missing an important part of education because we're refusing to interact with him the way we interact with our lower achieving students. Little David deserves more than a whole group lesson that he already knows. He also deserves more than just the time he gets pulled out with a specialist, because I know you're thinking right now, well, That's what we have the gifted and talented program for, or that's what we have apps for, or that's what we have, whatever you call it for those kids that are above grade level, whatever your district called it. How many times do those students get pulled out? Once, twice a week as they get older? And then we send them off to middle school or high school, or maybe you're a middle and high school teacher and you're teaching honor students or AP students, and those students are still above. What are we doing for them now? Because, yeah, AP classes may be the brink of our smart kids, and we're expecting the top of the top students in those classes, but you're always going to have one or two that are bored, and they deserve more from their education than to be sitting in the classroom bored. Because they're easy and they're forgettable. That's not fair. Intervention allows you a chance as an educator to meet with every single student and work with every single student. The response to intervention at its most fundamental part is that all students achieve at a higher level than that they entered. That means RTI, or response to intervention, expects that your lower achieving students are achieving higher than when they entered, your on grade level students are achieving above grade level, and your above grade level kiddos are achieving even higher than that. And if that's not possible, at least they're maintaining. We are not. Education is about pushing students. And our education system, the way we teach, has not been changed since the late 1950s. That's tragic, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work in today's world. We're having more and more students slip behind and receive services that they could be receiving in the classroom because it doesn't work. And I'm going to say it again, because the last and most important part about intervention is that it can be used for all academic areas and levels as well as behavior. Intervention can be used in the classroom at all times. Classroom management, academically, at all times. This training is going to ask you to rethink the way you teach and what happens in your classroom. In order to continue, you need to have an open mind because it's going to be challenging. I've worked with educators to create this training, and I have watched how their brains have been broken by the knowledge that is going to come out of this training. You cannot do it if you are not willing to change. So bear with me as we continue, have an open mind, and trust me, this is something that works. I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm not doing anything that you probably haven't heard of, but I am doing it more in depth, and I'm giving you, as classroom educators, the key to make intervention successful. Today, in today's world, intervention is going to be the future of classrooms. It's the only method that works right now. Other methods are going to come out, and I'm excited to see what they hold. And a lot of you think you're successful now, and you are. Nobody's a bad teacher. But we can be better. And this is the next step. Read the definition at the top for me. Read it. It's vague. It's not my favorite definition. Don't even really like it. But what I love is the 6 characteristics of intervention underneath. And these are the things that matter. So let's break these down one by one. Before I break them down one by one, I do want to go back really quick, and I want to let you know that this definition comes out of what the Department of Defense Education System is using as their intervention program, which is MTTS. Later on, all these resources that I'm listing down below in bright red, or they will be on the note sheet and things like that that are available on the website. Go look at those. It's a great resource. Again, it's not my favorite, but it is a great resource. It has lots of things in there that you can learn from. And to be honest, it's where I pulled a lot of information because it is a great resource. Not the best, but it's the best one I can find right now. Okay? All right, so let's go back to those 6 characteristics of intervention, and let's start with targeted. An intervention has to be targeted towards a learning goal, a very specific learning goal. Which is targeted towards a learning outcome. A learning goal that is not targeted towards a learning outcome is not successful. Now, most of you are probably thinking that's your students will be able to statement, and that's fine. That's a great start, but we want to make sure we are as in-depth as possible. And for this, I want you to use the SMART goal method. Students will be able to, based on this amount of time, with this amount of accuracy, is this something that's reasonable for students? All of those. Break it down and really, really focus on that, honing in on what students are going to be able to accomplish. These learning goals should be based on skills that are required to meet the Tier 1 learning goal. Now, before I continue, let's break down Tier 1. Tier 1 is that whole group lesson, right? Now, I didn't do a whole lesson, and I'm not going to do a whole slide on the response to intervention pyramid because you've seen it, you know it. Well, you think you know it. All of those things. We're not doing that. I'm not here to drill you on stuff you already know. So, Tier 1 is whole group lesson. Tier 2 is targeted, and Tier 3 is when they should be meeting with specialists, the special education team, all of those things. So, your Tier 1 goal should characterize the skills. Sorry. I don't like the way that came out. See, I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. We're going to go with it. I do apologize. I want to reword that. Your targeted goal for your intervention should be based on the skills that are necessary to complete the Tier 1 learning goal. Okay. A broad spectrum intervention, when this targeted goal is huge and broad, it's not an intervention. It's differentiation. And those are 2 different things, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. But for now, I need you to understand that targeted is a huge part, because if it is too broad, it is no longer intervention. It is differentiation. Okay? The next thing we have on here is they're systematic. We know children learn better when it goes 1, 2, 3. We know nobody can learn if you go 2, 5, 6. So an intervention has to be systematic in design. It has to make sense. If a child has skills A and B, and we're trying to get them the skill C so that they can accomplish the learning goal, which has A, B, C, then we know that we need to make sure that they have A, B, and then we can move on to C. If a child is missing A and C, well, we can't start teaching skill C unless they know skill A. So our system would be A, cover B again, even though we know they know it, and then go to C. It's research-based. That's super self-explanatory. I don't have a lot to say here. Your intervention, they're out there, and they're not hard. The Department of Defense has a whole online categorized folder for interventions that they've done. They've They've done the research. I don't even have to worry about it. California school districts each have one that I was able to find on Google. So again, I didn't have to do any work. They're research-based interventions that they offer to schools as a resource. Most schools, most districts have resources out there. If you don't know them, ask your specialist, your math specialist, your reading specialist. They should know them because part of their job is working on these interventions with kids as well. So if you can't find them for whatever reason and you feel like you're hitting a wall, you need to ask your specialist. When I say research-based, please don't groan because like I said, I'm not asking you to do more work. These should be easy to find. Your district should have them lined up. Your school should have them lined up. It should not take you more than 5 minutes. If it takes you more than 5 minutes, go ask someone. Do not spend more than 5 minutes looking for these. Don't. I'm going to skip monitored because it's a huge part and I want to make sure that I drill it home. So we're going to come back to it. And right now I want to hit timely. An intervention should make sense. Do not give a kindergartner 45 minutes of an intervention. The kindergartner can't sit through that. For that matter, don't give a fifth grader 45 minutes of intervention. That's too long. These interventions, but at the same time, we don't want to do 10 minutes. We want the intervention to be timely and we want it to make sense. Why are we spending this much time? Is it accessible to the child? Is this something that they can do in that allotted time? Will they sit for that allotted time? Another part of timely is how long? How long do we do the intervention? Now, I can tell you all day what research suggests. And you're not going to like it. We're going to touch later on how long intervention realistically takes place in a classroom because it's one intervention, theoretically, based strictly off, a perfect classroom, with everybody on grade level, all of those wonderful things should last 3 to 5 weeks, but we all know that's not realistic. So if you trust me, just wait and we'll come back to it and we'll talk about a realistic time frame of how long one intervention should last. Explicit. That means that encompasses a lot. Should be explicitly stated what the child is doing. If we are working on an intervention with a student, they should understand what we are doing because we are doing it to continue growing their skills. They should not have to worry about being able to read directions. They should not have to be worried about understanding it because we want those skills to be growing. This also means that you meet with every one of your students. That huge part of explicit is meeting with the students. An intervention cannot be an intervention if you do not meet with your students. You have to be meeting with each group, each child, and explicitly working with them and focusing on what they need. Okay, I'm going to jump back up to monitored. It's one of our last characteristics. And I am going to read the quote on the picture. An intervention cannot be an intervention if it is not progress monitored. An intervention without progress monitoring is just an activity. This is huge. Interventions have to be monitored. They have to. I don't know how many times I can say that in order for this to make sense. We are collecting data. It is like a living portfolio. We are consistently adding student data, observations, analysis. We're meeting, if you've pulled in specialists, which you should, this should be a team event. If you're pulling in specialists, you're meeting with them, you're monitoring the data, you're looking at what's going on, you're tracking each student or student groups, you are tracking them to see how everyone is doing. Is this working? If we are not monitoring it, then it's an activity, and if Susie fails, it doesn't matter. An intervention, if Susie fails, we go, why did she fail? Is she missing more skills than we thought originally? Is she doing this? Does she need further assistance? What can we do? Because all of this data at the end of the day can be used to prove anything and everything an educator can dream of. Intervention has to be monitored. Here's intervention sites. These took me less than 5 minutes, and I highly recommend that you take a look at them. They're full of other websites that help you with interventions. They're full of research-based interventions. They're from all over the world. They interact with curriculum. I love them. So I highly recommend that you look at them. But again, this was something I wanted to prove that it was super easy to find them, and these are all research-based. It took me less than 5 minutes to find all of these, and they opened up on a government computer. So I don't want to hear these excuses that they won't pull up on my computer. All of these will. Every single one of these will. Okay, so remember how I talked about the difference between differentiation, intervention, and an accommodation? Because right now I think your head is probably spinning and you're like, well, I thought an intervention was the same as differentiation, and I thought it was this, and an accommodation, where's the difference in that? So let's go over each of these. Differentiation, as stated earlier, super broad spectrum. It applies to everyone, but kind of not everyone. You're fitting instructions to meet different needs, but everyone could use it. So for this example, I love to use the one, hold on just a second. Okay, sorry. Is a teacher utilizing audio files. Sorry, I had to find my notes because, again, I'm human and I'm using notes to do this. If a teacher has one student that it specifically states in an IEP or a 504 plan that they need audio files of classroom lessons, this is an accommodation. The teacher provides them for that student and that student only, and it is in written form. Now, an accommodation can be used for differentiation and can be used as an intervention if done properly. Now, what the teacher does with this accommodation, like I just stated, is what matters. Differentiation is tailoring instruction to meet the needs of all learners. So if a teacher takes these audio files and gives every student access to those files, it's differentiation. We're allowing the students that need them to get them. We're encouraging students that need them to get them. If, a classroom lesson is too quick-paced, or we read from a textbook that I don't understand, or I just need to hear instructions one more time, every student has access, which is great. It's very broad spectrum. Everybody can use them. It's huge. And it's done in the whole group lesson. So it's done in Tier 1. Okay. Now, for intervention, the teacher gives students access to the files and then monitors certain students to see if it helps them reach the targeted learning goal. So, I'm going to use it as a differentiation and an intervention. I'm going to give it to everyone. But Bob, Susie, and Jane, who are missing certain skills such as focusing and note-taking skills, I'm going to give them the lesson in audio files, and then I'm going to monitor their success or lack of success with those. Then it becomes an intervention. But everyone in this, I didn't have to do much more, did I? Everyone in the classroom has access to these audio files. Everyone can use them. But I'm monitoring those 3 students because I want to see if this bridges that gap in those skills that they're missing and allows them to be successful in the overall lesson. So I take data. I make observations. I say, they've turned in an assignment. I score it, and then I write which one used audio files and which one didn't, and why. And I'm monitoring behavior. It becomes an intervention then. It's Tier 2 specific, and usually it includes differentiation. It should include it, but a huge part that changes it from differentiation is how specific it gets and that it's monitored. Okay? Okay. That was a lot. That was a lot of information. And a lot of it, I'm sure, was new or different than what you're used to hearing when it comes to intervention. I know right now you're screaming and protesting because I'm already made it sound unrealistic. I'm aware of that. All I'm asking is that you finish the lessons and give it a shot. Just give the lessons a shot. Lesson 2, we talk more about a realistic time frame. We talk more about what the reality of intervention in a classroom looks like. We dive deep into what it really is going to be. Lesson 3, we focus on breaking down monitoring, because I've used that word a lot, but let's be real, we might not know what we're talking about. We break down monitoring. And in lesson 4, we put it all together. I give you a scenario, I ask you to do some things, I do some things, we work together, and we do intervention in a classroom. Right now, I want you to go and digest what we just covered. Look at differentiation, look at accommodations, look at interventions, look at your classroom. Take a couple of days. This isn't something that needs to be done in a week. It can be. The training is built so that you can do it in a week, but it doesn't have to be. Take a step back, look at this, and then come back for lesson 2. Go read the notes sheet, use all the files I've provided, rewatch this video, then go to lesson 2.